Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Artist Management, How to Do It Yourself and When Not to, presented by NWC Webinars. It's great to have you all here today. So, just for starters, just to let you all know, this webinar and a whole bunch more are available at nwcwebinars.com. So, for this webinar today, we're going to be covering a few things. Obviously, it's about artist management. First of all, we're going to have Alexander Saint. He's going to talk about lessons from being self-managed, and Helen Britton, lessons from a manager, and then a quick Q&A. And of course, all of this is going to be hosted by the inimitable Mike Raine, the editor-in-chief of Canadian Musician Magazine, who we'll be seeing in a moment. And so, of course, our guests, we have firstly Alexander Saint. You may know him better as Alex St. Kitts. He's a self-managed artist, touring bassist, and he's also a multi-instrumentalist, songwriter, performer with solo projects called The Projector and Dumb Bass. He's worked with artists all over the place, including JP Sachs, Chaos, Serena Ryder. He's also toured with Francisco Yates, opening for Justin Timberlake, and has performed with Ed Sheeran at the Much Music Video Awards. And we also have Helen Britton, the CEO of Six Shooter Incorporated, who is the artist management component of Six Shooter Records. You can check both of their stuff out at I'mAlexanderSaint.com for Alex and SixShooterRecords.com for Helen. So, with all that being said, I'm going to turn it now over to your host, Mike Raine.
All right. Thanks, Andrew. We have a big crowd we're expecting today. The registration for today's webinar was fantastic. So we don't want to waste a lot of time getting to this, and we want to make sure that we have time at the end for a Q&A with Alex and Helen. So since Andrew was kind enough to do the intros already, I'm going to bring Alex and Helen into this. Guys, you here with me?
Hey, what's going on, Mike?
Hey, Alex. Good to see you, man. How you doing?
I'm great. Hi, everybody. How you doing?
And Helen, are you here with us?
I am. Hi. Nice to see you.
Hey, Helen.
I'm just going to change my view. That's better. Now I can see you guys. All right. So yeah, like I said, I don't want to waste any time. You guys ready to jump into the conversation?
Right.
All right. Like Andrew mentioned, we're going to sort of split this into two halves, guys. The first half, questions will be mostly directed at you, Alex. We'll be looking at your ample experience and insights about being a self-managed artist. Second half will be more directed at Helen, getting her incredible experience as an artist manager, her insights as an artist manager. That said, guys, I want to encourage you both to just chime in wherever you both feel you have something to add, even ask each other questions and make it a good conversation. But to lay the foundation for this, first, to just kind of define what we're talking about, Alex, do you mind, essentially, what does it mean for you to be a self-managed artist? When you're thinking what that manager's hat on for yourself, what kind of task are we talking about?
For myself as a self-managed artist, it's really, usual things like running day-to-day tasks, like sorting out my plan, which is something, to be honest, I hadn't learned until like last year or even starting the year before, is really like projecting into the future what you want to accomplish, what your goals are, how are you going to get there, what do you need to get there, and who do you have to talk to? Because something that I'm going to talk about probably for a lot of this, and I'm sure everybody, including Helen, will say the same thing, is you need a lot of help getting this thing going. And even when you're self-managed, you have to have people around you that you can trust. So with one of the tasks that I've been starting to look at now is figuring out who believes in my music and who wants to be a part of it, and who can help me push this thing forward. But yeah, more basic tasks are just like really like, are all my finances sorted, which is boring as all hell, but it's very important. Like, what do I have to get done in the next weeks leading up to a release? Like, what are the key points I need to hit? What are the milestones? Who do I need to contact? Yeah, and it varies. It kind of spills out from there. Yeah.
Awesome. At this point, you've had a lot of success as an artist, both as a featured artist and as a touring and studio musician with others. Don't be self-deprecating.
Right, you're right. It's 2021. None of that. No, none of that for any of us anymore. Right.
Should be like, man, you're not building me up enough. But anyways, as your career started to build and as it really became a career, know what I mean? At some point, it becomes your full-time focus.
Mhm.
So why was it the right decision as you reached that point for yourself? Why was it the right decision to stay self-managed? Was that the goal, or did that kind of happen because you realized you could do it?
I think it kind of happens out of necessity for both. I'll speak firstly as like being a musician. I find it easier to be self-managed as a musician because it helps me like keep track of gigs. And also I find when I'm dealing with artists as a bass player, they don't particularly like it when there's a middleman from myself as a musician, unless you're like higher up, like you're a Pino Palladino or like somebody really
Mhm.
big that needs somebody. Oh, I'm sorry, that needs somebody to like kind of keep all those things in check. But for where I'm standing, as still a successful bass player, I would say I can kind of keep track of what's going on myself, and it also allows me to collaborate with people because that's what we're doing as musicians is collaborating with people, and it allows that flow of collaboration to happen a little bit easier when I'm the manager, when I'm self-managing myself in that aspect.
Mhm.
In terms of an artist, again, that's just solely necessity. And for me personally, I mean, as much as the pandemic has sucked in a lot of ways, it's been really eye-opening for me because it's allowed me to really focus and figure out, okay, like what can I do before I actually need to call somebody in and manage me and help me run this business, which I know a lot of people, a lot of artists don't want to see themselves as a business, but that's what we
Mhm.
are, right? Like as artists and
Mhm.
musicians, you're running a business, and I'm not saying that takes away from your creativity, but you need to understand how that works for you as an artist and like what that entails for you at the end of the day. So, um, yeah, I mean, it's kind of just for me, I wanted to learn how to do this myself so that when I do hire somebody on, I know what to expect from them. I know what my strengths are and what they can help me build on off of my weaknesses. So that's really something important to me that I wanted to figure out. So I don't get taken advantage of, and I don't, not to say that everybody's looking to take advantage of me. I'm just saying that, like, so you know exactly what's happening in your business. Like it'd be kind of weird if like a plumber came in and like didn't know anything about their business, their finances, their business. Like I'm the best plumber, but I have no idea like where I'm going after this. I have no, you know what I mean? So I kind of
Yeah.
want to learn all those aspects and see how far I could push it forward.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. The drawing that differentiation between yourself, like as the session guy, as the touring guy, versus as the featured artist,
Yeah.
would your advice then be different for those whose primary career is as a featured artist when it comes to this topic?
I think there's a lot of parallels and a lot of similarities between both. I think they branch off at a certain point. Like I think
Yeah.
for me personally, I think I can continue being a self-managed musician and professional bass player because there's not a lot of moving parts in that. I mean, but there's still the same lessons, like what I was talking about, like knowing where your finances are, keeping your scheduling together, going out and looking for gigs and like
Mhm.
promoting yourself on that aspect, which and it's the same for the artist side. But I find with the artist, there's more pieces that I've learned over the past year from trying to be my own PR person, trying to be my own accountant, trying to be my own like digital marketer, songwriter, all the things, right? You're trying to be all the things. I'm like, okay, this kind of needs to something needs to give, right? So it does look like even for me at some point in the future, I am going to need to start look for representation because there's only so
Mhm.
much I can take on before it actually starts detracting from what I'm doing musically, which is, what we all want to do. But again, it just leads back to that thing that I really want to understand this business. And to be honest, sometimes there's things that I won't understand, and those are things that I write down as weaknesses. Those I don't understand, like PR especially, like that's a whole different ball game that I'm just like I'm gonna leave
Mhm.
somebody else to do that. But it like managing day-to-day tasks I'm pretty good at, so I can kind of like figure out my schedule and like and figure out who to connect to on emails or calls or what I have to do throughout the day, or even with launch releases I need to figure out that long, like, and it's like a 3-month plan, right? So I'm good up to a
Mhm.
point at that, but even that I need help with. So yeah, it's just it varies for both. Like, and like I said, I think it's a little bit easier to self-manage as a musician, but there's a lot of parallels like to both. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. There's a couple things on there I kind of want you to expand on in a second. One is that idea of identifying your own weaknesses and augmenting those with other people and allowing yourself to kind of concentrate on your strengths. Because I know you've mentioned to me before that that's an important piece of this.
Sure.
The other thing, actually, where I was going to jump to escape my mind as I was giving that preamble to the future question.
Right.
So, that will come back to me as you're talking. So actually, let's go to that point in terms of, just because you're self-managed doesn't mean you're a one-man team.
No.
Like you're talking about, you're realizing, all right, you do maybe need a publicist to handle that. That's a part that maybe you know less about and you're less equipped for.
Right, exactly.
So what's been that experience for you in terms of how to identify those areas where you do need someone, but also how to up your, play to your strengths by kind of upping your skills?
Yeah, I mean, it's really like getting into the trenches and like jumping headfirst into everything and seeing what works. And that's the thing is, as artists and musicians, like we're all so afraid of everybody saying to us like no. Because I remember even like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, like I'd have two people tell me my song sucks or tell me no, and I'd shut down. You know what I mean? And that's one of the benefits of having a manager or at least somebody on your team. Like the thing that I've been doing is actually having a friend sometimes help me field emails and send out things just on that behalf to have that degree of separation, which I know some people that you contact, that whether they're bookers or promoters or whoever, they like that degree of separation, so they don't exactly have to deal with you. They like to deal with somebody else, and then it keeps it very business and professional, which is great. But yeah, I for me it's yeah. I forgot what the question was. Yeah, I started rambling.
So just about kind of identifying what the weaknesses are, kind of knowing where you need to bring other people in.
Yeah, and like I was saying, it's just diving head first and like figuring out what your strengths are. Like for me, I hate sending. That's where I was going. I hate sending out emails sometimes, and I hate having to get those no's. So sometimes, so that's where a manager will come in or somebody that you can be like, hey, can you watch this mailbox, and they come in and like tell and like kind of forward things for me, or like look through things for me instead of me having to do that. Another thing that I'm really bad at, but I'm trying to get better at is finance. I've talked about that a little bit already, but I need to hire an accountant, and I needed to hire somebody that knows something about our business, because sometimes if you go somewhere like an H&R Block or wherever, somewhere that's going to help you do your accounting, they might not exactly understand what it is that you do. Like as a musician, our field is very different than a lot of things they work with. So make sure that you get somebody that that knows a lot about the finances that you're used to spending, like, gear, supplies, like booking rehearsals, like all those things are viable fees to write off, but some accountants don't know about them and will not include them at all. So that's another field that I've been passing off. Obviously, we talked about PR, which I feel like is its own domain, and I'm happy to say I've taken it pretty far. Like I've taken it as far as I think I can get to with it. Like I've cold called people. I've or cold email, however you want to look at it now. But I've gone out and like put myself out there, and you get a bit back, but it's not as much as somebody that has those keys, that knows where to input them in. And the biggest thing about finding these people and like learning about your strength, well, I'll talk about first about finding these people is it's got to be people that you trust. It's got to be people that really speak to you and speak to your music and want to help you, like genuinely want to help you. And that's something that's taken me years to find. That's something even as a bass player, and I needed help with things, it took me like a number of years to find people that I know that have my back no matter what. But yeah, like I mean, the short answer to that is like you just got to jump in and start doing it and see what things don't click. And that's even a hard thing to say. That's something I don't agree with myself saying, because sometimes it takes a couple of months to learn something. It doesn't happen immediately. And I'm not saying go out there and if you don't immediately understand something, just hand it off. Try and figure it out. Like somebody who's really good at that is my dad, who's also a singer. He works in Toronto as a wedding band leader and had a career as an artist as well. And something that he's really good at doing and also really bad at doing. Double-edged sword. He's really good at figuring out what he needs to move forward, but don't get to the point where you figure out we need to move forward and then you're like, I got this though, and keep running with it when you know you can hand it off. But because the goal for me in my artist career is to understand the limits of what I can do. Like, so for accounting, I know there's a limit. I've hit that wall. For PR, I've hit that wall, and I know, okay, that's time for me to like trade it off to somebody. And it's not going to be something immediate. It's going to be something that maybe it take you a few months to learn the insides and out of it. And
Mhm.
then you might decide that's not for me.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
gotta pass that off.
In terms of, and like you mentioned, you were fortunate to have your dad be in the industry and be able to learn not just music, but these kind of, the industry side a little bit from him. I would guess that for a lot of young artists who are self-managed and trying to figure it out as they go, one of the big doubts they have is like, I don't know the industry. I don't have the connections. I don't know the people. So like, how did you do that? And like, what would your advice be in terms of building up that confidence to meet people, meet the right people, where to find them, and learn the industry as you need to?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I mean, the first one is super obvious, and everybody's going to be like, "Thanks, Alex. That's not helpful." It's just going out. It is going out and meeting people and getting shot down, and like having people say no to you or like not be interested, and just kind of building up your skin to get thicker for those situations. But there's a second piece of that I feel like people don't talk about, and I wish I had learned a little bit sooner, is
Mhm,
how you approach these people, and
mhm,
how you build these connections, because some people have very specific ways that they want to be approached. Like some people don't want you to just come up and like throw all of their demos at you, and give you like a press kit and all this stuff. Like some people don't want that. Sometimes it's about playing the long game. I find in this artist thing, especially now in social media and like all and the internet and all this thing, everybody's trying to figure out the now, like what hits right now, what goes right now, how am I going to get there right now? But I've been finding more and more it's really about how you play the long game and what's your stamina. Because at the end of the day, you can like it takes a lot of work to go out and like cold call all these people and send out press kits and like still have to work on your music and still run all of these day-to-day tasks of whatever that might entail in your business. But um, you get burnt out really quickly,
mhm, mhm,
like really fast. And something that you should people should practice is like, yeah, maybe send out a couple emails. You might not hear anything back, but I know for some even music supervisors, for those who know about syncing and all that kind of stuff, like they don't want you to like constantly bombard them with stuff. And it's the same
mhm,
with booking agents. It's the same with a lot of managers. They don't want you just bombarding them all the time, being like, I was about to swear, my stuff's the best, and you should listen and blah blah blah, because they get like literally 500 to 1,000 emails every day from everybody. Like, you know what
mhm,
I mean? So
mhm,
it's really about and also not taking it too personally. That's something that I've really been trying to build, because as an artist, we're
mhm.
like, a lot of us are sensitive people. We're creators. We want to like show people the best of ourselves or the worst of ourselves in like in a different light, you know what I mean, and make people think about who you are as an artist. But we have to like not take things so seriously,
Mhm.
seriously, yeah, seriously, and also not take them so close to
Personally.
heart. Yeah,
Yeah.
so personally. Yeah.
The I'm realizing time's flying by. So Helen, I swear I'm going to get to you very, very shortly. But in terms of in talking to other artists over the years who are also self-managed and are doing, like you say, acting as their own publicist, acting as their own booking agent, and that kind of stuff. I know a common experience is like, I don't have time to be an artist,
Yeah.
or I'm so burnt out from the business side of things that I don't have the mental bandwidth left to be creative at the end of the
Sure.
day or whatever it is. And a lot of that comes down to scheduling. Be like, I'm going to dedicate this day to business, this day to art, or 9 to noon for business, 1 to 5 for art, whatever it is.
And that's so
Figure out what the
important,
schedule is.
right?
But
Yeah.
yeah, how have you found that balance and able to make that workable using those two sides?
It's exactly that. It's exactly figuring out what, and I will tell you, if you asked me like 2 years ago, Alex, like, what's your next week looking like? I would have been like, I don't know. What
Yeah.
does your next week look like? But I had to learn, especially trying to manage the artist side of myself, like the Alexander Saint stuff. Like I have to learn like what I want to get accomplished in the next couple of months, and that's how long it takes. It's not something that you can just come up to like the week before and be like, all right, I'm gonna get this done. It's something that you gotta learn how to do over a longer course of time. Like especially for people like PR that work in PR or labels or management, like they're thinking years in advance, a year in advance of what's actually going to happen. And that's something that took me a long time, because I'm also very impatient. I'm an impatient person, so I wanted everything to happen, but it doesn't happen like that. Nothing ever not ever. Nothing. Things rarely happen like that. And so I had to sit down. Like I wish I could show you. Like I'm looking at my wall right now, and it's literally like sticky notes, like all over the place that are just timelines of things that I have to get done. And like and you know, I try my best in the morning. From like in the past couple of weeks, I've been doing um like 10 to like 1 or 10 to 12. I'll just like pick up a guitar and start writing, and then I'll start looking at this, and then I'll look at this wall and see what needs to get done, start sending out some emails. Like it doesn't have to be a whole day, particularly depending on what your timeline is looking like, but it has to be something that works for you, that you can schedule, that you don't get that burnout that we're talking about, and you don't get frustrated. And you will, because like we're just humans, that's just what's going to happen. But at the end of the day, you got to figure out a system that works for you, whether it is taking a day. This is business. And don't forget like relax time, because that's important as well, right? I mean, nobody wants to talk about it, but that is a real thing. If you're like writing heartfelt songs or whatever kind of songs that you're writing, and then you don't have the time for your brain to digest them, and just jump right into like accounting or writing for a press kit, or like figuring out what your release is looking like, it's you'll just not want to do anything at all. So it's really just figuring out what works for you and scheduling it, and keeping that in mind, and like moving forward. Like, and I'm starting to get to the place where I'm having fun with it now, where I like, because I understand what needs to happen, and that, oh, if I figure out this shoot will directly relate to how I'm gonna do this pitch, and oh, this will go to how am I gonna work with this video, and oh, then the single can come back around like this, and we can do a live off the floor thing, and oh, we can like, but that's like 3-4 months planning in my brain, that and like my brain forgets things, so that's why I've written them all on this wall here. But it's just scheduling, man. It's just, and scheduling that works for you, and there's no super simple answer. Like I said, I have a sticky wall. Sticky notes on my wall, but it could be for you. It could be digital. It could be a book. It could be anything. Whatever helps you keeps your thoughts together. Yeah.
Perfect, man.
Yeah.
To kind of segue between this conversation and bringing Helen into it, but you were talking about, you're kind of reaching a point in your career where, whether it's bringing in a manager or just augmenting elsewhere, publicists or whatever it is, for most, most professional musicians are not megastars. Obviously, the big stars need managers. There's too much to do and too much going on to do it themselves. But for those like yourself, who this is their profession, this is their full-time career, would you say most people in this level are capable of being self-managed, or it's right for some and not right for others? And how do people know?
I think at the stage, and it's, yeah, in the beginning stages, I would say the first year of me doing this thing, like for real, like really pushing for this artist thing. Yeah, I think everybody can do it. It just really depends on how much drive and how much time and how much patience you have to want to do it. It's not easy. I'm not going to say that it is. And there's days where I won't do anything because it is overwhelming. But I think everybody can do it. I think we all have the capability. It's just all the things that we just talked about. It's like really sorting out how to make that work for you and what you're comfortable doing. Like, what strengths do you want to play on? Like, are you okay with cold calling emails, people, like, going out and spending money on different digital marketing or whatever? Like, it's what do you want to do in your managerial tasks? Like, what are you looking to get accomplished? I don't think I think everybody here can do it. I think, but then it does get to a certain point where, as you do gain momentum to your career, you do need to start looking for managers and looking for people that are willing to help you. Yeah.
And that's when you dial up Helen. So,
yeah, right.
Helen, to kind of flip that last question over to you now. When do you say, as the artist manager, when are you needed? Do you see artists come to you and want to talk about, managing them, and your honest assessment is like, you guys are doing a fine job, like maybe you don't need me right yet? How do you find, what would you say in terms of when artists need to make that transition?
I think it really depends on the artist. I mean, there are some people, like, clearly Alex has the right sort of brain for what he's doing. There are some people that just don't have that brain. And that's a really important part of it, because there's people I've worked with or I've seen who they just can't do it. So they just drop the ball and they just stalled out and they just they don't reply. They have a to-do list. They never get to anything on the list, and then nothing happens ever. And then there's other people who are just super like, I'm not sure which side of the brain oriented it is, but like the side of the brain where they can have a checklist and they can remember their things, they can juggle, they can get back to their agent or the promoter, they can, keep track of their expenses, they can deal with their accountant. It really depends on the personality and sort of the desire as well. Like some people are just, all they can focus on is their art, like real, like 100% of their brain is the art brain. And that person probably is never going to get anywhere without a team of some kind. And then there's others, and especially say if you're in a band where there might be several different kinds of personalities and you can separate it out, like, okay, you're in charge of, you deal with the agent or the promoters or booking shows, and you deal with our social media, and you deal with merch, and you advance the shows. If you can split it up amongst a group, you can get quite a long way with a band without a manager in that way. And even just the fact that there's multiple people involved means you've got different perspectives, and that can really help you come up with a plan. I think for some solo artists, it's really hard to sort of, you can't see the wood for the trees a bit sometimes, where you're just like, you're so in your own head about what's the plan. And sometimes you need someone from outside to come in and just look down on it and be, well, this is what you need to do, or like, this is your problem at Spotify, or here's your problem on social media and here's how to address it, or this is why your content isn't getting much interaction. It's not something you can necessarily see yourself. So long answer long is there's not really an easy answer to that. There's certainly a point where there's just not any money. So it's maybe hard for a manager to feel like they want to get invested yet because they're going to be donating so much of their time, and also hard for the artist to want to give up a portion of their money. I think the tipping point is where it feels like, and you'd figure this out in a discussion with a potential manager. You want to be at the point where, okay, I have to pay commissions to my manager, but this manager at this point is able to bring so much value to my career that I'm not going to feel that payment because they're going to increase my revenues enough that it just won't feel like it's costing me anything.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of, if you're having an initial meeting with a potential new artist client, what questions are you going to have coming into that meeting? But also, which can be very telling, what questions do you think they should be asking you?
Well, it's either like a first date or a job interview. It's that intimate a relationship where you need to really feel the other person out, because someone might be a great manager or somebody might be a great artist, but it might just not be a right fit together. Before I start working with a new artist, we have multiple 3-hour long meetings, like just hours of talking, huge discussion about values and what's important in terms of how that affects your work, but also how it affects your personal life, and what you are and are not willing to do, and and how to sustain your career in a way that works with your personal life. Say if you have a family, or like, do you want to bring your family on the road? Are you able to leave your family at home? Do you personally need a lot of personal space, or are you happy to go all the time? And as a manager, what's my expectation of you? You don't want to match somebody who actually prefers to be at home most of the time and just wants to tour a few weeks of the year. That's not going to work for all managers. Some managers are like, no, I want you to be active the whole time. That's how I work. That's how I can make a difference. So it just really depends on that kind of a match. Also, like decision-making process, some people I've managed, oh my goodness, it takes forever for them to make a decision, or I can ask a question and I don't get an answer for weeks. And to me, that doesn't really work. Like, I need to be able to not saying you have to make a quick decision, but like let's focus on making this decision so we can move to the next step. I have it in my contract that I need to have a response to questions within 48 hours, or you have to live with the decision I make for you. And that might be confirming a show or a studio space or whatever it might be, because I need to not have my hands tied. I need to be able to do my job for you. Otherwise you're all just spinning, right? So I think that's all really important. Lots of personality, mostly personality connections.
Actually, I'm just going to expand on that for a sec, and then we'll get into something else. But in terms of finding that right fit, I'd imagine you don't have the same relationship with every one of your artists.
No.
So is it really just a more ephemeral thing? You just feel it or you don't feel it? Or does there have to be something identifiable in that relationship to know, all right, this will work or this won't work?
I think there's definitely something intangible that you can feel. You obviously have to have the passion for the art and for the person. One thing that's super important that I've learned over the years is, as a manager, I cannot want it for my artists more than they want it for themselves. Because I have been in that position before where I'm, so passionate and I can see the path and I really want it for them. But, like they kind of want it, but they don't want to do all the things in order to get it. And so like there's a disconnect there. It's like you can't push them. It's theirs. It's their art. It's their career. And you can only, I just can't want it more. I can't push if that's not really the direction you want to go, or how hard you want to work, or how famous you want to be, or how much money you want to make, or whatever the thing is. So that's really important.
I remember a successful publicist telling me one time they like working with artists who have been their own publicists for a while, because it gives them a better appreciation of what the publicist does, but it also allows them just to work together in a more informed way. So do you like artists? Is it your preference that an artist has been really handling a lot of their own business on a professional level for a while, so they're coming in with some skill sets, but also a better understanding of what you're there to do?
And not necessarily. I mean, I definitely see that, and I can certainly see a lot of gratitude come back to you for an artist who's had to do that stuff themselves. On the flip side, there are some artists I've worked with who have done it themselves for a long time, and it's really hard for them to give that control up. So then there's this sort of like, okay, I'm supposed to be doing this, but you just kind of went ahead and did it. In fact, we just talked about the fact that I was going to do it, but you did it anyway, because it's hard for you're really struggling to kind of hand that over. And, and that can be really difficult. And I also have people I work with who have never managed themselves, and they know, because they've not got that skill set. And, you get the ultimate gratitude from them too, because they can't imagine. Like I had one of my artists say to me one time, because I think I was a little frustrated about some sort of like seemingly basic administrative thing that needed to happen and wasn't happening. And they had to kind of stop me and say, my brain doesn't work like that. Like this seems super simple to you, very straightforward and very obvious. And I see that it's frustrating to you that I haven't done it, but my brain doesn't work for those things. My brain works for these things. And, all these things that, of course, myself not being an artist sound impossible to me, like write a song, whatever, like get on stage, any of that, like to me, that's like, I can't even imagine. I wouldn't be able to do it. But to that person, that stuff was a no-brainer. So it's sort of like that recognition that it takes a different kind of brain, and it's really important to acknowledge the different skill sets people have and be at peace with that, and not have the expectation and the frustration when the other party doesn't have the same skill set. It's like, yeah, you're never going to file your taxes on time without me stepping in. That's just the way it is. To me, I love taxes. I got a brain like that. It's very straightforward and obvious to me, but it isn't to you. And that's okay. I'm going to do it for you, or I'm going to find the team to do it for you, or whatever the thing is.
kind of related to that, and it also relates to what Alex was saying about augmenting, identifying weaknesses and skills and augmenting where it's needed. Is what you do for your artist, does it change from client to client? Do you fill some tasks for one client that you don't fill for another because they're capable of doing that part themselves? Is it partly your role to kind of say, here's where I can best help you, and you can do that yourself, sort of thing?
It definitely varies because every relationship's really different and everyone's needs are really different. For the most part, I would say I fill a similar role, and I prefer to, because it's, like I said, it's a little confusing if like, no, I'm going to do this, whatever the managerial type task is, because that's where like things sometimes fall through the cracks, because there's like there's a lack of clarity about whose role it is. But a really good example is something like social media, where some artists are just really great at it and they're just rolling, and you don't really need to get involved other than sometimes say, hey, the show is announced, can you post this thing? And then there are other artists who just can't, they just can't do it. They don't know how to have their voice on social media. They don't know what appeals to their fans. They don't think to post. And in that area, for some people, I have to get more involved. I also have some artists who just have, say they write an album, they have such a creative vision about the rollout when it comes to themes and the photography connected and the other content, the live content, the videos. They have the cover of the album, they just have the vision. And others that don't, they come with the music and they're like, here's the music. Can you what do you think? Can you find some video directors? What do you think the singles should be? What do you think, who should we talk to about photographs? I don't know what to wear. Can you find a stylist? And so that can be really different. And I always prefer when all that creative comes from the artist, because I think it's more authentic, and it just, I feel like the fans can see it and feel it when it's all mostly coming from the artist. But there are some people that they deliver the music and then they want you to kind of build around that, which, we have this, we can do, but it's a little bit of a guessing game. It's like, well, we could go this way, we could go this way. Like, it still needs your kind of input, because it is still ultimately you. Like, I can come up with all the people, the creative teams and ideas, potential ideas, but you still sort of need that, the creative instinct on every level. But it's mostly that and especially the you see the variance when it comes to a solo artist versus a band and how you work together there, because bands are really tricky to manage because there's so many personalities, and who's really in charge, and what's the dynamic within the band, and do I have to sort of manage the band dynamic as well as the career, and does one person want to tour all the time and somebody else wants to stay at home, and am I exposed to the band dynamic, or is that sort of hidden from me as a manager? And is there are there internal grumblings because one person is doing all the dealing with the manager, but the others aren't, and therefore they sort of making up this other story in their minds about who's making decisions and what's happening. Yeah. So it's super complicated for bands.
And that actually touches on one of the last things I was going to ask you about. But first, I'm going to just tell everyone watching, if you have questions, start putting them in the chat, because that gives me a good idea of how much time we need to leave for Q&A. I guess either way, we're going to get to that shortly, but now's your time to start putting questions in the chat, I'll say. But Helen, actually, what you were saying there touches exactly on one of the last things I was going to ask about, which is in terms of those dynamics of managing a solo artist versus a band. When it comes to bands, I know it's going to be different because of personalities and such. Every band has its own dynamics. But is there one, let's say, more functional way for bands to act? Do you find bands are more functional if there's a clear leader, or if it's a democracy, one way or the other?
It really depends. The problem with democracies is that it can be a very slow way to make decisions. I mean, I'm sure, a very rare case where everyone's on the same page about everything at all times. But then again, if there's a clear leader, there's going to be some sort of disgruntlement within the band. That's also bound to happen because, somebody's got the power play there. So it is, and sometimes, or often I should say, I find the bands choose not to talk about these kinds of problems, because where's that going to lead? Like, where's it going to go? It's going to go to a big blowout, and you have to sit in a van together all day, and you have to be in hotels together and recording studios together, and you sort of have to hold it together, even though maybe you're not getting along. So I do find most bands just like try to just keep a lid on that stuff, but it does sort of blow up from time to time. You know, there are, I think, some examples where it's like smooth sailing. Everyone knows what their role is and they're happy to have that role. But I think there's always something with a band. I mean, bands are great and all that, but there's also a lot of difficult things about a band. Like, there's more people to share the money with. You know, as a solo artist, you can choose to perform solo. You can just hire one or two musicians. You don't have to do a full band. You can sort of manage the finances of it. When you're splitting everything 5 ways, you really have to get to quite a good position before that's a full-time income for 5 people. And then to throw a manager in the mix as well, and to be able to pay that bill, you know, that's really quite challenging.
Perfect. Well, guys, this conversation up to this point has really flown by, for me at least. So we're going to get to Q&As. First, do the two of you have any questions for each other by chance before we get to audience questions? Not to put you on the spot, and if not, we'll get to
I do actually.
audience questions.
I actually have a question. If because I'm sure a lot of people are wondering the same thing. Touching on what I was saying before, like how, you know, people like to be approached, like there's a certain way that management or whoever want artists to approach them. If people are looking to approach 6-Shooter Records, how do you like usually artists to approach you? Like, what's the most, and in teaching, this is for artists out there, like in teaching how to be professional for yourself, like going forward, what's the most professional way that you would want artists to get in touch with you, or like even correspond with you?
Well, I mean, there's email is a great way to get in touch, but there's also trying to get through the noise, right? Like, I get a lot of email, and yours isn't, you know, as a cold email, as a solo, an artist, whatever. It's not necessarily going to be the top of my list to reply. And I also know I can't reply till I've listened to the music and sort of like really researched it. And then it might get pushed further down my inbox, and then I forget. And, you know, usually that's the case. It's not like, oh, I'm ignoring it, I'm not going to reply, I just like forgot, whatever. I mean, the best way, you know, when I'm thinking about relationships I've made with people who've become clients, it often comes with recommendations from other people. Like maybe your booking agent I work with on another project, and they're like, hey, Alex is looking for a manager, what do you think? Like, if the booking agent's going to recommend you, I'm going to absolutely make the effort to go and do the research, and probably going to take a meeting with you or whatever. Or anybody else. Maybe it's you're friends with somebody else on my roster, or you know, I mean, it sort of sounds so nepotistic when I say that, but really, like, what you want to know when you're thinking about that, not only is the music great, because I can research if the music's great, but like, what's the personality like? Is this someone who, do they have it together? Are they serious about their career? Are they, you know, does this other person think that we're going to connect well personality wise? That's really why I like the recommendations, because it's obviously a lot of work to get that just through our own conversations. But there's also other ways, like, oh, you just got nominated for a Juno or an Indie Award, or just got that big billboard for Spotify at Young and Dundas, or some kind of like highlight moment to share that's, I mean, like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Or
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but on that front, do you find that artists that have been kind of like grinding it out, like how often do you find that it's somebody that's been doing it for like 6 months and just like hit the scene like that, they get put on your radar? Or is it more artists that have been doing something for a longer time that kind of to get those accolades? Like, which one kind of appears on your radar a little bit more?
You know, both do, to be honest. Yeah, like there'll be oftentimes actually what appears on my radar is someone has, broken up with their management, didn't work out, looking for a new manager. Now, of course, I want to know, why didn't that work out? But there's a million reasons why it didn't work out. It doesn't necessarily mean something bad about anybody
Right.
involved, but that's certainly a question. But okay, they've worked with a manager before, like they understand how it works, or that happens a lot, because a lot of times they have a team, and the team around them, their booking agent, their label, whoever, is going to do the outreach, because they do not want to deal with you directly. They just don't want to. It's the reality. So they're desperate to find a new manager. So that's probably the number one way people approach. And I know it's a weird time right now because no one's performing, but when there's a lot of performing sort of out on the scene locally, to hear a lot about like, well, this person's being talked about a lot, or 5 people have separately mentioned this person, or that person was playing the Horseshoe, but now they're playing whatever, Massey Hall or whatever. Right. I'm like, okay, something's happening there. I need to check that out. That it's way harder right now, where you can't show those benchmarks of growth.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right, guys, we got a lot of questions streaming in. So let's try to get through as many as we can before you guys need to bounce. And if we start to go over, I know you're both busy, so don't worry about being rude. If you got to go, you got to go. But all right, first up is from Al Bors, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, so apologies if not. But he says, do artists with self-management experience have leverage in commission negotiations? So I guess that's more of a question for you, Helen.
I mean, not with me, because my value of my skill set that I've built over 20 plus years is the same regardless of what has already been built up. So whether someone's already sort of built up themselves to a certain level, or worked with another manager to build them up to a certain level, I'm still going to be the one coming in and taking it on. And I'm not going to sort of take up a slot on my roster to do a half management job. Like, okay, you keep doing these things and I'm just going to do these. Because if it's taking up a slot on my roster and what I like to call my brain space, you're taking up as much of my brain space, whether I'm, giving up half the admin tasks to you or doing them all myself. So not for me, no.
Next question comes from Adrian. It says, this is kind of a conceptual question. So he says, if I had to teach an artist to self-manage with the idea that they'll be in that role for their entire career, and you only had 1 month to impart your knowledge, what would your core areas of focus be? And in brackets, he says 80-20 rule. Did you get that?
Let me just go back and see if I can find it so I can read it. I think I get the question. Yeah.
Essentially saying, if you had to essentially give someone a crash course in being self-managed, you only had limited time. What's the core things you need to focus on teaching them?
I mean, being professional first and foremost, and trying to figure out what tasks you can actually take on yourself to like further your career, and that entails like what we were talking about earlier, having goals. Like what do you see your artist career being? Like, do you just want to like play a couple of shows? Do you want to book a tour? Are you like looking to release a record? And then you need to look at what is involved in each of those tasks. Like maybe you do need to start figuring out how to book gigs for yourself. Maybe you do need to figure out or you need to talk to somebody about doing that and teaching you how to do that. It's all, the whole thing for me about self-management is always learning, never being afraid of not learning something new, or like you might not understand, but you kind of got to push through. And like Helen said, there are people who like it's just not their thing to do it. But I think for everybody, it can't hurt you just to sit there and really try to figure out what, if you are going to hire people like we were talking about, like PR, booking agents, creative direction, these points, these main focuses of being a self-managed artist, or being an artist and getting management eventually, like what is realistic for you to take on, and does that relate to your goal at the end of the day? And if something doesn't, then just leave it. But one thing for sure I would say is like finances, like know your finances. That's one core thing that I think a lot of musicians and a lot of artists really have to take seriously and learn, because as soon as you know what your cash flow is, which is where your money's coming from, how it's going to be spent, and everything associated with that, it makes it a lot easier to plan what your next 3 months are going to look like, what is actually feasible in those months. Sorry, that was longer than I.
No,
Yeah.
All right. So this next one, there's a lot of questions about money and splits with managers and that kind of stuff. This next one's from Noah. Is there an industry standard commission rate for solo indie artist and an artist manager? Tips on how to navigate that financial relationship for first time managed artists.
The typical is 15 to 20%. The exception is sometimes when it's a band, and I was just talking about the financial struggles of a band. Sometimes when it's a band, a manager might agree to just be paid as an equal split to the other partners in the band. So say there's 5 band members and a manager, they might be just paid like as if they're a 6th band member. So like a net deal. The one thing I didn't mention, but I am the president of Music Managers Forum Canada. And so anybody who really wants to learn more about management and also being self-managed, because we also cater to that. But if you want to go and join the MMF, it's not very expensive. And we do tons and tons of programming all year long. We have masterclasses, we have 101s. And we also have a code of practice and a sort of list of what's normal to expect from a manager. In fact, we just revamped this and we're about to launch it in the next couple of months, like a sort of like, it's reasonable to expect your manager is fluent in these areas of business. Like it's a bit of a cheat sheet. So that might be a really helpful thing for anyone who is either self-managed or is looking for a manager. And also there's tons of opportunities going to come up at the MMF for mentoring and opportunities to ask specific questions directly to managers if you're kind of unsure if something is normal or not.
Perfect.
There'll be new programs coming up over the next few months.
Just to reiterate that for people, that's the Music Managers Forum Canada. The website's mmfcanada.ca. All right. The next one, where were we? From Sophia. For younger artists that are just starting out, would you say social media is the best way to promote singles and such? Or are there other methods to gain a platform that you would suggest? So I guess you can both weigh on that.
If you want to go ahead, Helen, that's cool.
Well, I mean, social media is life these days. Whether you like it or not, it's a very important platform. I think it's very difficult to establish a career without it. Whether you love it or hate it, that's actually the reality.
I totally agree. And because it's, I mean, mostly free, right? It's not all free.
Right.
But it's the best way for you starting out on free platforms to really find your niche and find your audience. And that's actually something I didn't talk about so much that is very important if you're self-managing, is like know your audience and know like who you're catering to, and at the end of the day where you want your music to be seen and heard. And those are like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all that stuff are perfect places. Facebook maybe not so much these days, but Instagram, TikTok are like really great places for you to figure out like how do I want to present myself, and how do I get in front of people? Because everybody's on there, all artists, managers, labels, everybody. People are getting discovered every day on those platforms. So that's probably the best way, followed by running ads campaigns, which can run X amount of dollars depending on what your budget is.
I'll just chime in there in terms of promotion for artists and that kind of stuff. Social media is necessary. It can be useful, yes. But I'm just going to say, when it comes to artist promotion, it's really like a throw everything at the wall kind of thing. Email lists are important. Media outreach of any kind is important. A great tip is don't be afraid of stealing other artists' ideas. Look at other artists that are like you and see where they're promoting themselves or where they're getting attention. Think outside the box in terms of, if you're really passionate about something, you're really passionate about cat adoption. Maybe there's a music partnership with, the Humane Society or something like that you can get into, just anywhere where there's a fit for your music or your personality or passions, look for it. So yeah, when it comes to promotion, it's a throw everything at the wall kind of thing.
And here's a little soundbite for you. People say they spend all this money on marketing and promotion or all this time or whatever, and 20% of it works really, really well for them.
Yeah.
But they don't know which 20% is working. So you kind of have to do it all to cover up that 20%.
I'll take that soundbite. That's a good one.
Yeah. It's like a little frustrating, but like you don't know where you don't cut this because that might be the part that's doing all the work for you. It's really hard to pinpoint it.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. From Mohan, again, apologies. I'm painfully Anglophone, so apologies to anyone whose names I get wrong. But hopefully from Mohan, what are some basic things independent artists / bands tend to miss or not have in order, by the time that they get to the stage of their career where they're seeking management?
The number one thing they don't have in order is their finances. And usually there's years of taxes to be filed. They got a GST number, but they never did their GST returns. Or they filed, but they didn't, and Alex touched on this before, use an accountant that understands the industry, so didn't know that they can write off their iTunes subscription or, Apple subscription, Spotify, every CD they ever bought, or like there's all sorts of things. Like I talk to people constantly, friends or artists that I know who are, I got to do my taxes, but I think I owe this money. And I'm like, well, did you write off all these things? I can write off all these things. It's like, yeah, you're a musician. When you buy guitar strings, when you go and like buy an album because you're researching sounds and trying to like hone your craft, that's all business expenses. And, all of a sudden you don't owe tax anymore. So like, I would say number one is a financial. And then number two is sort of like getting so tied up in the small details that you forget the big picture of the strategy.
Perfect. Next up from Ryan, building on the important point about not always pitching yourself constantly, do you have tips on how to build relationships with potential management or even agents, labels, those kinds of partners when you don't have any team members yet?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, it's hard now because the go-to thing would be like go to shows and like hang out by the merch booth and like, get to know people and get out there and meet people. But it's kind of, and the way that I'm focusing on it for myself being self-managed is first kind of building that team of people to help me notice the attention, like Helen was talking about before. Like it's really about bringing your biggest game and your A game so that you get nominations, you get awards, you get noticed in places that you wouldn't normally. And really a big thing for me right now is building that team around me to help me push into that space, right? Especially now since the space is specifically digital. I've been working with digital marketers and photographers and who else? People. Core team members that like co-producers and people that can really help me and co-sign me. That's a big thing too. Like somebody that can be like, this person's great, you should go check them out, and really co-sign them to push you to that next level. So I would focus on kind of building the team before even approaching any kind of management, because once you have something to offer that's unique and yours, then and maybe I'm wrong about this, but it seems like to me it's a little bit easier to get in front of those people and have something more tangible to offer than just kind of going for it. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Kind of rambled for a bit.
And next up from Alyssa, says, hey Alex, I'm doing all of our band management, PR, socials, and radio. I'm just wondering what tips you may have for Spotify playlisting, because I know you got a lot of plays on your last couple singles.
Well, I can tell you what you shouldn't ever do is don't go to some random playlist thing and pay for your streams. Don't ever do that, because now they're cracking down I did do that because you have to learn.
I've heard they will take you down, and it's hard to get back on the service. Hard to get back up,
and they're cracking down even harder, so you might be able to appeal it, but yeah, so definitely don't do that. I mean, for me, for streaming spot, like as somebody who's kind of doing this all myself like you are, I kind of hit all the avenues like we were saying. Like I go on Submit Hub. I'll like apply for PR through MusoSoup, who also have channels towards Spotify playlists. I'll contact sometimes individual users to try to get user generated playlists. I'll reach out to friends and artists who I know that have gotten those plays and ask them how they did that and if they have a connect. Because sometimes it's that easy. And like I'm very fortunate because my friend JP was just happened to be doing a playlist for Apple and was like, oh yeah, my friend Alex is great, and got on there. Sometimes it's that easy, and then sometimes it's the opposite where you got to go through a bunch of channels. Obviously, apply through the editorial, Spotify editorial when you upload your channel, because upload your song. But yeah, those are the main kind of ways that I go about it now. I hope that helps.
I'm just going to add to that because this streaming playlisting happens to be a topic I've covered off in the magazine and on our podcast and moderate conference panels on and such. So I've just copy pasted into the chat there for everyone to see a link to a fairly long article I did last year, as well as to a podcast episode with Aaron Kinghorn from from DPG. Sorry, I was like drawing blanks. But anyways, those are a couple things. Podcast episode there and a long feature article specifically on that topic of streaming playlisting and some tips and advice in how to go about it if that's your thing. Mm-hmm. All right. Just trying to see. Sorry, that was the last of the questions I had directly in front of me. Oh, it's 2:30. So I do think we got to wrap this up. We're kind of right on time in that case. I'm guessing there's some questions here I missed. Guys, do you want to say, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot because I know a lot of people don't like a lot of random emails, especially when they're very, very busy. But if people happen to want to get a hold of you, is there anywhere that you would like to direct them to?
I think my email address is on the website, but it's just helen@sixshooterrecords.com with the caveat that if it's a question, you're probably going to get a one-line answer because I get a lot of email.
Fair enough.
Right. Yeah, for me, you can hit me up on Instagram at I am Alexander Saint, or I also have an account under Alex and Kits, and I'm happy to help if I can. Hopefully I can.
All right. Awesome, guys. I know both of you are busy, like I was saying, your time's valuable, and I'm really glad that you've both been able to make the time. I think you've shared a ton. Both of you shared a ton of invaluable insights. So yeah, I really appreciate it. Folks, if you want to rewatch, there's a point that you want to review or didn't jot down and want to go back and listen to, anything like that, this webinar is going to be available in a couple of days on the NWC YouTube channel. Easiest way to find that, to be redirected there, go to canadianmusician.com/YouTube. It'll redirect you there. And this webinar will be available to rewatch in a couple of days from there. All right, Helen, Alex, thank you guys. Again, I really appreciate this.
Thank you.
And of course, Mike, thank you as well. And thanks to everyone for attending. Again, you will be getting an email with some follow-up in terms of the actual stream to watch again. And as well as we'll include the file of the chat as well, so you can go through and see all the questions that were asked again, and as well all the connections that people were making in here as well, so that you can all follow up with each other. But again, Michael for hosting, Alex, Helen, thanks everybody for coming, and everybody have a great rest of your day, and thanks for coming out.
Thank you, everyone. I hope you got some value out of it. Be safe.
See you.